What if I told you the most important spec in a gaming handheld isn't a spec at all? On my left, MSI Claw 8 AI Plus, a beast packed with a bleeding edge Intel Core Ultra processor. On my right, the undisputed king of handhelds, the Steam Deck, a device with hardware that's now 3 years old. On paper, this should be an absolute knockout, but the reality of which device gives you a better gaming experience is a lot more complicated and a lot more interesting. Today, we find out why. At its core, this is a comparison of two different ideas on how to make a great gaming handheld. The Claw is all about putting a powerful Windows PC right in your hands. It's running on a brand new Intel chip that has a lot of raw potential. The Deck is different. Well, custom built everything for this device. The hardware, the software to work together to squeeze every last drop of performance out of it. It's less about raw specs and more about being really smart with the power it has. Let's see how that plays out in a real game. But before we dive into performance, let's quickly cover the key specs. The most important one is price. The Steam Deck OLED I have here costs 679 euros, while the MSI Claw comes in at 999 euros. That 320 euros price difference is something to keep in mind through all of these tests. Then you have the screen. The Deck has its famous 7.4-inch OLED panel with a 90Hz refresh rate. The Claw has an 8-inch LCD screen but with a faster 120Hz refresh rate. And finally, there's the weight. The Claw weighs in at 795 grams and the Deck at 640 grams. Now that we have the specs set, let's get to the test. Before we jump into the numbers, I want to show you how I'm testing this, so you know it's a fair comparison. First, I'm using a capture card, so recording the gameplay doesn't affect the performance at all. Second, and most importantly, both devices are running the same game at the exact resolution and graphics setting. We are using 1280 by 800, which is the Deck's native resolution, and the in-game medium preset. This keeps the playing field perfectly level. And finally, we're going to run two main tests in Cyberpunk. First, a 15-watt test. Think of it as a fair fight test. Then we'll let the Claw go all out at 37 watts to see what it can do when you give it all the power it wants. Okay, let's see what happens. Alright, first up is our 15-watt test. This is a really interesting comparison because the power level is exactly the same on both. Okay, the results are in. At 15 watts, the Claw hit an average of 42 frames per second and the Steam Deck hit 45 frames per second. It's clear that with the same amount of power, the Steam Deck is surprisingly more efficient and delivering more frames. A very interesting result. But the Claw has another trick. It's turbo mode. It can pull up to 37 watts, more than double the power of the Deck. I wanted to see what happens when we let it go all out. And as you would expect, the performance really jumps up. We're now at an average of 80 FPS. That's a huge increase, but that extra performance comes from somewhere. You can see the power draw is way up and the temperature goes from 60 degrees Celsius to 80 degrees Celsius. You're getting more frames, but the device is working a lot harder. Numbers are one thing, but what about just using them? This is all about the day-to-day experience. First, let's talk about the feel in the hands. This is obviously subjective, but for me, the Steam Deck with its heavily contoured grips feel very secure and molded to my hands. The MSI Claw is a bit blocky. After playing for an hour, I personally found the Steam Deck to be more comfortable. Next up, the screens. And this is a fascinating trade-off. The MSI Claw has a physically larger 8-inch screen and a faster 120Hz refresh rate. On paper, those are great specs, but the Steam Deck has an OLED panel, and for me, that's a real difference maker. The colors are so much more vibrant, and the perfect black levels make games look incredible. While the Claw's screen is bigger and technically faster, the Deck screen is simply richer and more immersive. For overall visual quality, it's a clear win for the Steam Deck. And finally, the simple software experience. Getting into a game on the Deck is super fast. You turn it on, you click your game, and you're in. The Claw is a Windows PC, which means a few more steps. And the sleep and resume feature on the Deck is amazing. You tap the power button, it's asleep, you tap it again, and you are instantly back in your game. So after all the testing, what's the final verdict? I think asking which is better is the wrong question. The right question is, who are these for? Because honestly, there are two clear winners here. First, there's the winner for balanced performance and ease of use. If you want the best performance per watt, a stunning OLED screen, and a seamless console-like experience right out of the box, the Steam Deck OLED is your winner, full stop. It's the more efficient and polished machine. But there's also a winner for peak performance and flexibility. If you want the absolute highest frame rate possible in turbo mode, the freedom of a full Windows PC and a larger screen, then the MSI Claw is the device built for you. So, which camp am I in? Well, I have huge respect for the Deck's efficiency. It won a fair fight. My personal choice is the MSI Claw. I'm someone who values having that peak performance in turbo mode and that unrestricted flexibility of Windows. The Deck is probably the smarter choice for most people, but the Claw is the one for me. I'm really curious to hear what you guys think. Which approach do you prefer? And what other games should I test out on these? Let me know down in the comments. If this video was helpful, a like is always appreciated. If you want to see more comparisons like this, feel free to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.